world of organized crime has always been fueled by power, loyalty, and betrayal. But when tensions boil over, even the most secretive underworld can erupt into open warfare. Across decades and continents, rival factions have clashed in deadly feuds, leaving trails of violence that shock even the most hardened observers. Today, we delve into the 7 bloodiest feuds in organized crime history, exploring the explosive rivalries, calculated vengeance, and catastrophic consequences that defined these brutal battles. Behind every vendetta lies a story of ambition, betrayal, and the high-stakes game of survival in a world where alliances are as fleeting as life itself. The Castellammarese War, 1929 to 1931. The Castellammarese War was born out of an intense power struggle between 2 dominant mafia figures in New York during the late 1920s, Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano. Both men sought control over New York's lucrative criminal underworld, which had become increasingly fractured due to Prohibition's rampant illegal alcohol trade. Masseria, a seasoned mobster with a penchant for violence, controlled much of the city's Italian-American crime syndicate. Maranzano, an ambitious newcomer from Castellamare del Golfo in Sicily, sought to challenge his authority and expand his influence. The conflict was more than just a personal rivalry. It reflected the tension between mustache Petes, who clung to old-world Sicilian traditions, and younger, more progressive gangsters looking to modernize organized crime. This brewing tension escalated into a full-scale war when both sides began orchestrating assassination attempts, leading to an all-out blood feud for dominance. The Castellammarese War reshaped New York's organized crime scene in profound ways. It was marked by strategic betrayals and several high-profile killings as both Masseria and Maranzano vied for control of the underworld. In April 1931, Masseria was murdered by his own men, allegedly orchestrated by rising gangster Charles "Lucky" Luciano, who had grown tired of the old-school leadership. Maranzano quickly assumed power, declaring himself the boss of all bosses, but his reign was short-lived. Just 5 months later, Luciano had Maranzano killed as well, effectively ending the war. This power shift led to the creation of the 5 families, which Luciano structured to distribute power more evenly among the city's most powerful mafia factions. The end of the Castellammarese War marked the beginning of the modern American mafia, with a more organized and cooperative structure that would dominate New York's criminal landscape for decades. The Sicilian Mafia War, 1981 to 1983. The Sicilian Mafia War, also known as the Second Mafia War, was a brutal internal conflict within the Cosa Nostra, primarily driven by the rise of the Corleonesi faction led by the ruthless Salvatore "Toto" Riina. The Corleonesi, hailing from the small Sicilian town of Corleone, were known for their cutthroat tactics and relentless ambition to seize control of the mafia. By the early 1980s, they had grown powerful enough to challenge the Palermo-based mafia families, who had traditionally held more influence in Sicily. Tensions between the factions boiled over into open warfare as Riina launched a campaign of violence to eliminate his rivals and assert dominance. One of the key triggers of this conflict was the Via Carini massacre, in which Palermo boss Stefano Bontad, a major opponent of the Corleonesi, was assassinated in 1981, signaling the start of a ferocious and bloody vendetta. The Sicilian Mafia War had far-reaching consequences that extended beyond the criminal underworld. Riina's relentless campaign left a trail of bodies, including prominent politicians, journalists, and anti-mafia judges, sparking outrage across Italy. One of the most notable victims was General Carlo Alberto Dalla Chiesa, an anti-mafia crusader who was gunned down in Palermo in 1982. This brazen attack, along with the murder of judges such as Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, galvanized public support for stronger anti-mafia legislation. Law enforcement responded with an unprecedented crackdown on the Cosa Nostra, culminating in the Maxi Trial of 1986 to 1987, which led to hundreds of mafia members being convicted. The Sicilian Mafia War not only redefined the power dynamics within the organization, but also ushered in an era of intense scrutiny and legal action that significantly weakened the Cosa Nostra's stranglehold on Sicily. The Chicago Outfit versus North Side Gang, 1920s. The conflict between the Chicago Outfit and the North Side Gang took root during the turbulent era of Prohibition, when the U.S. government's ban on alcohol created an enormous black market for liquor. Organized crime syndicates, particularly in cities like Chicago, seized the opportunity to control this highly profitable illegal trade. The Chicago Outfit, originally led by Johnny Torrio and later by Al Capone, was one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the city, with ambitions of total domination over the bootlegging industry. In contrast, the North Side Gang fiercely resisted the outfit's expansion, primarily made up of Irish and Polish mobsters and led by figures like Dean O'Banion and later George Bugs Moran. This rivalry was not only about money and territory, it was deeply personal, fueled by betrayal, assassinations, and a relentless desire for revenge. The most notorious event in this violent feud was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which took place on February 14, 1929. Al Capone, determined to eliminate his biggest rival, Bugs Moran, orchestrated an ambush in which 7 members of the North Side Gang were lined up and gunned down by men posing as police officers. Though Moran narrowly escaped the massacre, the event shocked the nation and marked a turning point in organized crime history. It solidified Capone's reputation as a ruthless mob boss, but also brought unwanted attention from law enforcement, significantly contributing to his downfall. The massacre became one of the most infamous events in American crime history, symbolizing the extreme violence of Prohibition-era gang wars and the lengths to which criminal organizations would go to secure control over illicit markets. The Second Mafia War, 1962 to 1963. The Second Mafia War in the United States was an internal conflict within the American Mafia, ignited by the power struggle between 2 of the most influential crime bosses of the time, Vito Genovese and Carlo Gambino. The war had its roots in the aftermath of the earlier struggles within the Mafia, particularly after the incarceration of Genovese, who still wielded significant influence from prison. Genovese had orchestrated the downfall of his former ally-turned-rival, Frank Costello, in 1957, positioning himself as one of the most powerful mafia figures. However, Carlo Gambino, head of the Gambino family, had his own ambitions for dominance. The tension between these 2 titans created fractures within the mafia, leading to a series of high-profile hits as each sought to consolidate power. One of the key flashpoints of the Second Mafia War was the assassination of Albert Anastasia in 1957, an event that sent shockwaves through the underworld. Anastasia, a brutal enforcer and the head of what became the Gambino crime family, was gunned down in a barbershop in an audacious hit widely believed to have been ordered by Gambino and his allies. This murder set the stage for Gambino's rise to power, but it also intensified the ongoing conflict within the mafia. As Genovese tried to tighten his grip on the organization, he faced mounting opposition from Gambino and other leaders. The war ultimately weakened Genovese's position, and he was left isolated within his own family. The Second Mafia War helped reshape the American Mafia's power structure, reinforcing Gambino's position as one of the most powerful mob bosses, while Genovese's influence steadily waned, marking a pivotal moment in the Mafia's evolution. The Irish Mob Feud, the Westies versus the O'Banion Gang, 1960s through the 1980s. Irish organized crime in the U.S. has deep roots, with significant strongholds in both New York and Chicago. By the mid-20th century, the Irish-American mob had evolved into 2 main factions, the Westies, who operated out of Hell's Kitchen in New York, and the O'Banion Gang, the remnants of the earlier North Side Gang that dominated Chicago. While these groups were geographically distinct, they shared a common culture of violence, loyalty, and a fierce dedication to controlling their respective territories. The Westies, led by figures like Mickey Spillane and later Jimmy Coonan, thrived in the 1960s and 1970s by controlling union corruption, extortion, and loan sharking. The O'Banion Gang, which had originally been part of Chicago's violent Prohibition-era conflicts, still held sway in Chicago's underworld, though their power had waned by the 1960s. One of the most pivotal moments in this Irish mob feud was the assassination of Mickey Spillane in 1977. Spillane, a charismatic but traditional mobster, found himself in conflict with newer, more ruthless elements within the Westies, especially under Jimmy Coonan, who sought to modernize and expand the gang's influence. Spillane's murder marked the end of an era, signaling the rise of a more brutal, cutthroat version of Irish organized crime. Meanwhile, in Chicago, the O'Banion Gang's influence was fading due to law enforcement crackdowns and increased pressure from the Italian Mafia. Both factions eventually met their demise due to the relentless efforts of law enforcement, particularly through FBI infiltration and RICO prosecutions. By the 1980s, the once dominant Irish mob had largely crumbled, with many of its key figures either imprisoned or dead, bringing a close to a bloody chapter in the history of organized crime. The Russian Mafia Wars, 1990s. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 created a power vacuum that allowed Russian organized crime to explode onto the world stage. As the state lost its grip on the economy, criminal enterprises filled the void, capitalizing on the chaotic transition from communism to capitalism. These new Russian mafia groups, known as bratvas, engaged in widespread racketeering, extortion, and money laundering. The 1990s became a battleground for these emerging crime syndicates as they fought to control the vast wealth flowing from newly privatized industries. Moscow in particular became a hotbed of violent turf battles, with criminal factions ruthlessly eliminating rivals in their bid to dominate the black market. Russian mafia wars weren't confined to Russia itself. Their influence quickly spread to Europe, Israel, and even the US, where they began infiltrating legitimate businesses to launder their illegal profits. Two of the most infamous figures to emerge from this chaotic period were Semyon Mogilevich and Sergei Mikhailov. Mogilevich, known as the Brainy Don, became one of the most powerful and feared figures in the Russian mafia due to his intricate money laundering operations and vast international criminal network. Mikhailov, leader of the Solntsevskaya Bratva, was another key player in Moscow's underworld. Their organizations were involved in bloody turf wars that saw numerous high-profile assassinations and bombings, further destabilizing post-Soviet Russia. Law enforcement faced an uphill battle as the Russian mafia's operations became increasingly sophisticated and globalized. While efforts were made to dismantle these organizations, many of their leaders operated with near impunity, exploiting the lawless environment of the 1990s. The Russian mafia wars left a lasting legacy, with criminal syndicates continuing to influence global markets, especially in sectors like oil, gas, and arms trafficking. The Yakuza feud, Yamaguchi-gumi versus Sumiyoshi Kai, 1980s to the 1990s. The Yakuza, Japan's infamous organized crime syndicate, operates with a complex hierarchical structure rooted in centuries-old traditions of loyalty, honor, and discipline. The largest and most powerful Yakuza family, the Yamaguchi-gumi, has long been a dominant force within Japan's underworld. By the 1980s, the Yamaguchi-gumi was at the height of its power, expanding its operations into new territories and businesses, including real estate, construction, and international drug trafficking. Meanwhile, the Sumiyoshi Kai, the second largest Yakuza family, sought to challenge the Yamaguchi-gumi's dominance. This rivalry led to a series of violent confrontations, primarily in urban areas like Tokyo and Osaka, where control of illicit markets was fiercely contested. Unlike the rigid, centralized structure of the Yamaguchi-gumi, the Sumiyoshi Kai had a more decentralized approach, which sometimes made it more adaptable, but also less cohesive in its operations. The clashes between the Yamaguchi-gumi and the Sumiyoshi Kai throughout the 1980s and 1990s were marked by high-profile assassinations, violent street battles, and economic sabotage. These feuds disrupted the Japanese underworld and had a significant impact on the broader society. Public safety became a growing concern, especially as innocent civilians were sometimes caught in the crossfire. The Japanese government, alarmed by the escalating violence, began to increase its efforts to crack down on Yakuza activity. The anti-Boryokudan, anti-Yakuza laws, introduced in the 1990s, sought to curb the influence of these gangs by targeting their business fronts and restricting their ability to operate in legitimate sectors. Despite these efforts, the Yakuza remained a deeply ingrained part of Japanese society, although the feud between the Yamaguchi-gumi and Sumiyoshi Kai left a lasting scar on Japan's criminal landscape, pushing these organizations to adopt new strategies and adapt to a changing world. The long-term impacts of these bloody feuds on organized crime are profound, reshaping the structure and strategies of criminal organizations around the world. Whether it was the Castellammarese War in New York, the violent struggles of the Sicilian Mafia, or the brutal Yakuza turf battles, these conflicts were pivotal in determining the future of organized crime. They forged alliances, dismantled long-standing power structures, and often led to the emergence of more sophisticated and cooperative criminal networks. Many of the criminal syndicates we see today, whether the five families in New York, the Yamaguchi-gumi in Japan, or Russia's bratvas, are products of these violent power struggles, with their modern-day operations reflecting lessons learned from these historic conflicts. These feuds also left law enforcement grappling with new challenges. The rise of global crime networks, money laundering, and cybercrime has pushed the boundaries of traditional policing methods. Law enforcement agencies now face organized crime groups that are far more elusive and complex than their predecessors, using modern technology and international ties to evade prosecution. As crime syndicates evolve, The fight to dismantle them requires an equally innovative approach, with international cooperation, intelligence sharing, and advanced forensic techniques playing key roles. Despite the efforts of law enforcement, organized crime continues to adapt, with new players emerging on the global stage. The legacy of these feuds serves as a reminder that, while the faces may change, the underlying motivations for power, wealth, and control remain central to the world of organized crime, making it a persistent challenge for society and law enforcement alike.